Well, here on Bay Radio, it's time to get some information from Blevins Franks. A couple of weeks ago, Blevins Franks advisor James Sterling talked us through the Spanish tax residence rules, explaining the criteria to make you liable for Spanish taxes on worldwide assets. This week we're joined by James's colleague, Jon Pemberton, and we'll turn our attention to the UK's residence tests. So, Jon, how are you?
I'm well, Howard. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Always good to catch up.
Yes, indeed. Nice to speak with you again.
Well, believe it or not, the UK now has two residence systems for determining liability to US taxation, but they work very differently and serve distinct purposes. Today, Jon will focus on the statutory residence test, and next week we'll move on to the long-term residence status. So, Jon, what is the UK's statutory residence test, and what purpose does it serve?
Yeah, the statutory residence test is the definitive framework used by the HMRC to determine whether an individual is a UK tax resident. Its primary purpose is to provide clarity, but for expatriates, specifically those living in places like Spain, it can be a bit of a minefield. So many people assume that if they do live abroad, they're automatically non-residents. However, if you retain property in the UK or spend significant time there, you could unknowingly trigger UK residency. Now, why does that matter? Well, if the test deems you a UK resident, you're liable for UK tax on your worldwide income and gains. Furthermore, your global assets could remain within the scope of the UK inheritance tax. It isn't just for recent leavers either. Even long-term Spanish residents can fall foul of these rules if their UK ties aren't managed carefully. And understanding the statutory residence test is essentially about preventing unexpected tax bills or even worse, an HMRC investigation.
How does the test work?
The statutory residence test isn't just about counting days in Britain. It follows a strict three-tier hierarchy, and you have to work through them in order. And the moment you meet one of the tests, your status is settled. There's no need to continue to move to the next one. The first is the automatic overseas test. This is what we would call the safe harbour. You're treated as non-resident if you are a UK resident in the last 3 years, but spend fewer than 16 days in the UK this year. You were not a resident in the last 3 years and spend fewer than 46 days in the UK, or you work full-time abroad, i.e. 35 plus hours a week, and spend fewer than 91 days in the UK, and work in the UK for fewer than 31 days. So number 2, the automatic UK residence test. Conversely, you are deemed a resident if you spend 183 days or more in the UK during the tax year. Your only or main home is in the UK and available to you for 91 plus days and used for at least 30 of those days. You work full-time in the UK for a 365-day period without a significant break. And number 3 is called the sufficient ties test. If you don't meet the first 2 tests, we look at your ties to the UK.
So what sort of things are considered as ties?
Well, family, so a spouse or children who are minor and still living in the UK. Having accommodation, so a place to stay which is available for 91 plus days. Work, doing at least 40 days of work in the UK per year. There's the 90-day tie, so spending 90 plus days in the UK in either of the previous 2 years. Or there's the country tie, spending more time in the UK than any other single country, only for leavers though. And this works on a sliding scale, and the more ties you have, the fewer days you can spend in the UK before becoming a resident. It's a delicate balancing act, if I'm honest.
What happens if someone meets both the UK and Spanish tax resident rules?
Well, this is what we call dual residency. Both countries might claim you as a resident under their own laws. The good news is that the UK-Spain double tax treaty usually provides a tiebreaker rule to ensure that you aren't taxed twice on the same income. However, it doesn't solve everything automatically. You may still have reporting obligations in both countries, and to minimise exposure and ensure you're claiming treaty relief correctly, professional cross-border advice is essential.
Do you find many people don't understand their tax resident status? What happens if they get it wrong? How can they ensure they pay tax in the right place?
In all honesty, the complexity of the Statutory Residence Test catches people off guard. It's very common for clients to have a gut feeling about the residency, but that doesn't necessarily align with the legal reality. And the consequences of getting it wrong, well, it can be incredibly expensive. You could face back taxes, interest, and significant penalties from both the HMRC and the Spanish authorities. The solution, the only way to ensure you're paying the right tax in the right place, is to consult an expert who understands both jurisdictions.
And of course, Blevins Franks is an expert, been around for more than 50 years, and the website is blevinsfranks.com. What information's on the website?
You're absolutely right, Howard. At Blevins Franks, we do specialise in these exact situations. And yes, I'd encourage anybody to look at the website, as you say, www.blevinsfranks.com. You can locate your local office, download our detailed tax guides, and book an appointment with a partner who can give you a definitive assessment of your position. And I think the message is, don't leave your residency to chance.
Okay, and we'll pick up the baton on this at the same time next week.
Fabulous. Thanks, Howard.